Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every week, and sometimes I post garden vlogs too. If that seems like the sort of content that you'd be into, I hope that you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today we're going to be doing something really fun. We're going to make maraschino dark chocolate chip cookies, just in time for the holidays. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but chocolate covered cherries are one of my favorite candies. So this just hits the spot. So you're going to start this recipe off with 2 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Now, keep in mind when you're making this recipe makes a lot of cookies. I didn't get a total tally, but it was a ton. So this is definitely a good recipe for sharing. Or, just keeping to yourself if you happen to like chocolate covered cherries like I do. So to my flour, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and then I'm going to go ahead and just whisk my flour and my baking soda around a little bit. Now, if you were using unsalted butter for this recipe, you would want to add a half a teaspoon of salt as well to your dry ingredients, but all I had was salted butter, so I'm not adding any extra salt. Just make sure you whisk your flour around really well, that you break up the clumps of the baking soda, because if you've ever bitten into a chunk of baking soda, it is a very unpleasant experience, and you don't want to ruin your cookies with that. So I'm just going to set my dry mixture aside, and in a fresh bowl, I'm going to add a half a cup of regular granulated sugar and a half a cup of light brown sugar that I have packed into the half cup. I'm also going to add a half a cup of butter that has been softened a little bit in the microwave. As I said before, just remember, if you're using salted butter, do not add the extra salt or your cookies will just be too much. Now, this is not really a ton of sugar for the amount of cookies that this cookie dough makes. And when we ate these cookies, we found that they're not really all that sweet, but a lot of the sweetness comes from the chocolate chips and the cherries. So don't worry, it's plenty. So all I'm going to do is whisk this together, try to get all of the sugar, the brown sugar, and the butter incorporated really well. Do my best to keep it in the bowl. And then we are going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Now, into your sugar and butter mixture, you're going to add 1 large egg, preferably kind of at room temperature. You don't really want this shockingly cold out of the refrigerator or it will seize up your butter. And I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of almond extract. Now, you guys know how I am with vanilla. I always add extra vanilla. You really don't want to do that with almond extract. It is strong and potent. And if you add more than a half a teaspoon, that is all you're going to taste in these cookies. So just measure that very carefully. Then we move on to the vanilla. I'm going to use 1 teaspoon. But like I said, vanilla is kind of a personal taste thing. So I just kind of made a heavy teaspoon of vanilla. I really like vanilla. And then all that's left to do with this mixture right here is just to whisk it. You want to whisk this until everything is not only combined, but until the butter and sugar mixture becomes kind of light and fluffy. It really doesn't take very long. It takes even less time if you're using a stand mixer for this, but I didn't feel like washing my stand mixer, so I just did this by hand, and it went by very quickly. So just whisk it all together until there's no big bits of egg and everything is light and creamy. And of course, in true Jennifer fashion, I realized the bowl that I had my butter mixture in was not big enough because I needed to add my dry ingredients to my wet ingredients, so I had to swap bowls. You're going to want to add about half of this flour at a time. Now, at first, when you're mixing this together, it's very light. It's very easy to mix. But by the time you get the rest of this flour incorporated into your butter and sugar mixture, it's going to become kind of sandy and dry. Don't panic. It's supposed to be that way because we still have to add our cherries and our chocolate, and there's one extra ingredient that we will add in here that will help to pull this cookie dough together. So just mix it until all the flour is combined, and then you're going to add about 3/4 cup of chopped maraschino cherries. You can add more than that if you really like cherries. I'll leave that totally up to you. And then I added 1 cup of dark chocolate chips. You're just going to fold this in together to try to make sure that the cherries and the chocolate are evenly distributed without smashing up your cherry bits. So you'll see here I'm just folding it over using my spatula to cut through the mixture and just trying to make sure that everything is spread out. And then the last thing we're going to add to this dough is 1/4 of a cup of the juice that came with the maraschino cherries. Now, I'm only going to add a little bit in at a time. You may not need the whole 1/4 cup. It depends on the humidity level of where you live and how dry your flour is. So I'm just going to add a little at a time and continue stirring until the dough is soft and sticky. This is a pretty sticky dough. Now, I imagine you could refrigerate this if you wanted to roll this dough out into balls, but this is more of a drop cookie, so I didn't really fuss with that. I didn't put it in the refrigerator. My flour did end up needing the entire 1/4 cup of cherry juice, so just keep that in mind, add it slow. Now, miraculously, I found my cookie scoop. So I'm using my smallest cookie scoop to just scoop out little dollops of this dough onto a flat cookie sheet with a piece of parchment paper. You can just use 2 spoons. You can just pinch out a little bit of it at a time and drop it on the tray, but you really need to make sure that these cookies have about 2 inches between each other. You bake them at 350 for 10 to 12 minutes. I baked mine for 12. It was perfect. Or until they're just a little golden brown around the edges. Now, when you take them out of the oven, they need to sit for about 5 minutes on the cookie sheet before you remove them to your cooling racks. And that's it, you're done. I just had to move through the rest of that dough, and like I said, it made a ton of cookies. So, if you're a fan of, chocolate covered cherries, I really hope that you'll give these cookies a try. They're crispy on the outside and they're soft and cakey on the inside, and they're just absolutely amazing. You get that punch from the dark chocolate and the sweetness from the little bits of maraschino cherry inside of them, and they are absolutely wonderful. So I hope that you give this recipe a try. And until next time, friends, happy cooking.